of racketeering. According to Joan Pritchard, the wife of pickleball co-creator Joel Pritchard, the game got its name from the pickle boat in rowing. What is a pickle boat? Deb.
The annual booze cruise.
I like that answer. Yep. The audience is giving you 1.5. Ali?
The pickle boat is a group of unwashed rowers who smelled like they were fermenting for a bit, and then they got the incredible name.
I'm going to give you half a point
Yeah,
because the answer is a pickle boat is a boat made up of random leftover rowers thrown together on a team, and they usually finish last.
I'll take my half point.
Right. Yeah.
That sounds about right then.
Yeah. Guess loser boat was taken. What is one of the most common injuries in pickleball? Ali.
Hurt feelings when your family tells you suck.
4 points. That's a 4-point answer. Deb Kimmett?
STIs from the Apres pickleball.
Now you're on board. Now you're on board with the STI.
Oh, incorrect, but I like both of your answers better than the real one. Pickleball elbow. So stupid. You can't just take your sport and say elbow after it, and it's an injury. That's the firing line, everybody. We are getting close to that magical time when our Danforth Music Hall audience places their votes. But first, here again to tell us why he thinks any movement that rallies support for pickleball is strictly out of bounds. Let's hear again from Ali Hassan.
You know, apparently Will Smith is a fan of pickleball. He does it mostly to work on his backhand. Folks. Now, listen, I know what you're thinking. You're like, Ali, what about all the other great sports named after preserves? Like chutney hockey, and marmalade ball, and sauerkraut minton. Folks, this is gonna blow your mind. Those don't exist. And neither should pickleball. Thank you.
All right. Ali Hassan. Yeah. That's a strong closing argument. Now, here to cross-court the audience's favor in service of pickleball, it's the one and only Deb Kimmett.
What is this sound? That is the beautiful sound of a wooden paddle whacking a hard plastic ball. In fact, let's all do it together. Let's all do this. And if you can't do that, go. Everybody. Oh, that's a beautiful sound. And it's the way it will sound in the future if we all play it. And it'll be like garlic breath. It's not bad if everybody has some. So have some pickleball, have some fun, hear the sound of the future. Thank you.
Deb Kimmett. All right. Deb Kimmett with a little audience participation. Audience, it is up to you to decide by applause who felt that Deborah's pro pickleball pronouncements had the best net result. Deb Kimmett. Wow. Woo. All right, that is a big response for Deb. And who felt that Ali's hilarious anti-pickleball ribbings were real rib picklers? Ali Hassan. It's close. It's respectable. But I got to give this one to Deb Kimmett. Pickleball is the sport of the future. Big hand for Deb Kimmett and Ali Hassan, everybody. Well, that's all for this week. I'm Steve Patterson saying to all our pickleball enthusiast listeners, I hope it keeps gherkin for you. I'll argue with you again soon, Canada. Good night.
The Debaters is created by Richard Side. This week's episode was produced by Nicole Callender, Chloe Edbrook, Dean Jenkinson, and Graham Clark. With continuity by Graham Clark, Diana Francis, and Gary Jones. Technical production by James Perella and Todd Reimer. Story editing by Gary Jones. With special thanks to Katie Ellen Humphreys, David Pride, and Emily Ferrier. Executive producer of CBC Radio Comedy is Lee Pitts. And thanks to everyone at the Danforth Music Hall in Toronto.
This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. Writer and raconteur Fran Lebowitz is known for being a loyal New Yorker who has an opinion about everything. But could she run the Big Apple?
Oh, I'd be a great mayor. The problem with being the mayor of New York is that I couldn't win because I am not everyone's cup of tea. In fact, I'm not enough people's cup of tea in order to win.
Fran Lebowitz on the Sunday Magazine with Pia Chattopadhyay. Sunday morning at 9:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC.
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're at +7 degrees with sunny skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. At the top of the news, rents are still climbing in many parts of the country, but there is some good news. Renters in Canada's most expensive cities are getting some hope. A new report from rentals.ca shows signs of moderation. Nisha Patel has your details.
Overall rents in Canada were nearly 9% higher in March compared to the same time a year ago. But average rents for condos and apartments in the most expensive markets of Ontario and BC actually fell slightly, with Vancouver dipping below $3,000 a month for the first time since July 2022, as people relocated to cheaper cities.
Alberta leads the way with respect to rent growth, and that maps to their population growth is also the fastest in the country.
TD Bank economist Rishi Sondhi says the influx of non-permanent residents in recent years has stoked demand for rentals.
There's been a lot of government focus, certainly at the federal level in terms of enhancing rental supply, and we are seeing that come through.
Still, he says it's slower population growth that will cool the overheated rental market, and that may not come until 2025. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
A 38-year-old woman has been arrested after hundreds of financial and identity documents were stolen from an apartment complex mailbox. Winnipeg police say the documents were stolen between October of last year and January. Constable Danny McKinnon says 2 suspects got inside the building along Dalhousie more than a dozen times and repeatedly stole from the mailboxes.
It's pretty brazen. We know from the first release that we had put out that the damage they did to that very, very large mailbox system, which I understand houses 300 tenants, individual mailbox areas, it was extensively damaged.
Police searched a home in Fort Richmond on April 9th. They found hundreds of financial documents, stolen laptops, and a gun. McKinnon says anyone who suspects their mail was stolen should cancel their credit and debit cards. Manitoba has a new groundwater agreement with Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Ottawa. The province's deal on sharing surface waters will soon include underground aquifers crossing their borders. Patrick Chernesky is with the Prairie Province's Water Board. He says the change is most welcome, especially as drought impacts groundwater levels.
Most of the water that people think of is surface water. So it's an important aspect because increasingly rural and urban residents are drawing upon groundwater.
Chernesky says the agreement will likely be signed in the coming months and could cover close to 30 major transborder aquifers. Canada's top spy has made his much-anticipated return to the inquiry into election meddling. The commission wanted to clarify on what CSIS Director David Vigneault knew about possible foreign interference and what he told the Prime Minister and his staff. Tom Perry explains.
Order, please. A brief appearance to clear up some lingering questions. CSIS Director David Vigneault back before the inquiry into foreign interference to explain why some information contained in CSIS briefing notes about Chinese interference in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections never came up in the actual briefings with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his staff.
It's not extraordinary to go to a briefing having material and having prepared yourself to discuss a topic, and it's something completely different that happens to be discussed.
Vigneault says for that reason, briefing notes typically contain vast amounts of information, with not all of it making it into any given meeting. That said, Vigneault agrees with the assertions in those briefing notes that China interfered in the last two federal elections, but that in neither case did it affect the outcome. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
With the U.S. presidential election campaign in full swing, U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson visits Donald Trump today at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. But as we hear now from Richard Madden, there's more to Johnson's visit than just the November election.
The two will appear side by side and reportedly introduce a bill to make it illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. Of course, this has long been illegal in the U.S., so this event is mostly for show to fire up the party's base in this critical election year. But there's another more pivotal reason why the speaker is cozying up to Trump so publicly. He needs his support as his speakership is under threat from within his own party just 6 months into the job. Far-right Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene recently filed a motion to oust him for not fully embracing the Trump agenda.
The current Speaker of the House we have right now is getting rolled in every single meeting. He is negotiating from weakness.
So the Speaker's allies have reportedly asked Trump to publicly support him at their joint appearance today. So we'll be watching very closely to see how this plays out. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
And a band that got its start in Winnipeg is making news.
Stay away from me.
According to Rolling Stone magazine, Burton Cummings is terminating the performing rights agreement for all the songs he wrote or co-wrote for the Guess Who. It means unless Burton Cummings or Randy Bachman is in your band, you won't be able to perform any Guess Who material. The magazine says it's an attempt by Cummings to stop a group currently on the road calling itself the Guess Who. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg.
Listen what I say.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to Radio Noon for this beautiful sunny Friday. At least it's beautiful and sunny where I'm sitting in downtown Winnipeg right now. My name is Janet Stewart. Again, thanks for being here. Today on Radio Noon, we're talking about faith, prayer, and its role in the legislature. The Premier's looking for ideas on how to change the prayer the Speaker recites at the start of each session to make sure it's inclusive. What do you think? We're taking calls today at 12:30, 204-780-0893. If you don't have a phone plan that lets you call Winnipeg for free, the number's 1-800-268-5483. The top doctor of stars shares what is key to saving lives in an emergency a little later. But we begin today with a topic that bonds us all, our lousy roads. You know that sound, don't you? The sound of potholes. If you're driving right now, you're likely swerving to avoid them and perhaps complaining about them. The city of Winnipeg blames the large spike we've seen in potholes on the unusual winter weather we've had. It was really quite mild. Nominations for 2024's Worst Roads in Manitoba list that CAA compiles every year. Well, the list for this year ends tonight at midnight, so you've got to get your vote in if you want it to count. Teresa DeFelice knows that list of worst roads very well. She is Assistant Vice President, Government and Community Relations for CAA Manitoba. Hello, Teresa.
Hi, Janet. How are you?
I'm great. And this is such a talker. We all wish our roads were in better shape. What kind of responses have you received to this year's survey?
Well, we've had quite a few roads nominated. Over 475 roads have been nominated across 64 municipalities in Manitoba. And we expect that list to grow up until midnight tonight when the voting and nominations ends. And we'll have to see what the roads look like when we reveal the top 10 list in a few weeks.
Why do you think this survey is something that so many people respond to?
Well, we do surveys of our members in Manitoba, and, over 80% of members are venting about poor roads, but they're venting to their family and friends or colleagues. Very rarely are they talking about it where the decision makers are, with government. And so this really actually gives people a voice and an opportunity to let government know what pain points they're experiencing, which roads are the pain points they're experiencing in their daily lives.
How does the survey work?
Well, you go on to caaworstroads.com and you'll be able to go to a Manitoba page, and then you nominate a road that you would like to see on the list. And, I can tell you, even though it's all individual nominations, it's crowdsourced. And so the top 10 that gets revealed, we vet it, we make sure everything's legit when we finally do release that list. But it's crowdsourced. And so it's always surprising to see how many people come together who don't even know each other, but actually elevate a particular road in their community to get attention.
That I would think that crowdsourcing thing would give Winnipeg, where the population's so high, and its roads kind of an advantage. Do you ever have like rural roads that really come in strong?
Well, there's 2 points, actually. At CAA, we release the top 10 for the entire province, but we also release a top 5 in various regions throughout Manitoba to make sure that, communities with smaller populations do also get a voice. But I'll tell you, trending over the last few years, we did see a lot more rural roads end up on the top 10. And so, communities coming together to create attention, especially when there's multiple jurisdictions, right? A perimeter road or a provincial road versus, a big road or a road in a big city. And so this year, remains to be seen. We're so far, I can share a little bit. We're seeing a mix of both Winnipeg roads, of course, but also some rural roads.
How do we know that this survey actually makes a real world difference?
Well, that's the benefit of it. And CAA does an advocacy, not just in providing this campaign, but then we also follow up with government. We track those roads. And so we know after last year's campaign, Goulet was slated to have construction started on it. And we see that time and time again, even in sometimes our casual conversations with the mayor of Winnipeg, who was a counselor. He said he used to take a look at this list and get the roads in his community prioritized based on the top 10 list. And so we know they're watching, they're paying attention, and where feasible, they're making some changes to the scheduling of which roads get fixed when, and in order to satisfy the communities that are speaking up.
So is this the squeaky wheel getting the grease?
Well, it does create a tension. And sometimes when municipalities or the province puts together a repair, it's based on very, stringent sort of engineering facts. But sometimes you need that pulse on the ground to tell you actually this road is a bigger issue than maybe some engineering data or transportation data alludes to, and that the volumes of people or people speaking up loud are saying actually this road is really causing a problem, and it's not just based on whether it's a few cracks in the pavement. It's based on lots of people taking that road and feeling like they need their voices heard.
So many people say it's frustrating to see roads deteriorate year after year. Governments say, it's a money problem. Roads and bridges are expensive to maintain. What are your thoughts on that?
Transportation infrastructure is significantly expensive to maintain and fix. It's also why we also look at provincial and municipal budgets around and provincial and federal budgets, actually, to see that they're providing municipalities with sources of revenue. But sometimes municipalities, like we see in Winnipeg, raise their revenue, so raise their taxes. And I think this year what we heard is we're raising your taxes, but we're taking a good chunk of that in order to fix the roads and deal with the infrastructure problems that we have. And so we don't always like those tax increases, but at the same time, if we're seeing that those dollars are being put to work, that's definitely something that we want municipalities in the province to do. And also, recognizing that if they do the repairs as they come up, it's a lot less expensive than having the road just really deteriorate to a point where you've got to scrape the whole thing apart and add fresh layers of, layer upon layer to make that road nice and fresh and new again.
Oh, so you think that if they took action and went out and filled those cracks as soon as they started, as opposed to waiting for them to be big, that would make a difference?
It definitely helps prolong the work. I mean, the reality is we live in Canada, and we have harsh climates, and that there's a lot of factors into what and how fast a road deteriorates. But a recent survey that I talked about, one of the biggest pain points in with our members in Manitoba is that the roads don't last long enough. So part of that is maintaining those potholes so that the potholes all don't connect, or the cracks in the road all of a sudden don't make what we call sort of like alligator-like driving on roads. And so, those maintenance things of keeping up on pothole fixes, cracks and things will help provide some longevity and create less wear and tear and before you have to do those big fixes.
Teresa DeFelice, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. And remember to vote. You have until midnight tonight.
Thanks for the reminder. Teresa DeFelice is Assistant Vice President, Government and Community Relations for CAA Manitoba. To nominate a road in your community as one of Manitoba's very worst, go to caaworstroads.com. You can do so until midnight tonight.
Earth Day at Fort White Alive is a magical time, and this one is for the birds. Let's celebrate not by looking at the earth below, but by looking up to the skies at our feathered friends who make this place so special. I'm Bryce Hoy. Join me for a virtual bird tour. Come to Fort White Alive's Earth Day celebration April 21st and follow the posted QR codes to learn some amazing bird facts. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
It's almost 12:16. You're listening to Radio Noon. My name is Janet Stewart. On this beautiful Friday, we want to talk to you about the place of faith in the legislature. What do you think about this changing the prayer business, about the Premier's call to make it more inclusive? We have a guest coming in, an inclusivity expert, someone who's really advocates for inclusion. And we're going to talk about this issue of the prayer. That's coming up at 12:30. Our call-in, we want to hear from you. The number to call, 204-780-0893. If you don't have a plan that makes that call to Winnipeg free, it's 1-800-268-5483. In the weather today, mainly sunny for Winnipeg, a high of 13 degrees. Our Saturday's looking sunny as well, although there is a slim chance of morning showers. High would be 13 as well. Sunny on our Sunday, 17 degrees, and a chance of rain, it looks like, on Tuesday. Riley Lachuk's going to be in to take a look at our weather forecast with us at 12:35 today, right after the news, and right before our call-in. Remember, give us a call, 204-780-0893. Next on Radio Noon, we talk about emergencies and what makes responding to them work with the top doctor of STARS on a mission to raise awareness about critical care and emergency medical transport. The top doctor of STARS is on a mission to raise awareness around why the service is critical to saving lives. The nonprofit organization provides critical care, and medical transport services across not only our province, but also Saskatchewan and Alberta. Dr. John Froh is the Chief Medical Officer of STARS. He's been in Brandon this week to speak with the Association of Manitoba Municipalities and to raise awareness. I had a chance to speak with him yesterday. Hello, Dr. Froh. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Janet.
You know, emergency medical care is such a concern for Manitobans right now, especially if you live in a rural area. I can't imagine that anyone who does visit rural Manitoba or live there doesn't understand the value of having an air ambulance service available in the case of an emergency. What is the message that you think Manitobans don't understand about what STARS does?
Well, I'm not certain that there's a message that they don't understand, but what I'm doing here in Brandon today is speaking with the Manitoba municipalities about really what our core mission is. So STARS is a helicopter air ambulance service, a not-for-profit charity service that provides critical care transport and care for Manitobans in a timely fashion and really is woven into the existing healthcare structure. So we work very closely with our partners at Shared Health. And as well, we're funded through Shared Health for a portion of our operating budget and ultimately through the government of Manitoba.
And how is funding now? We know healthcare funding is such a big question always. Are there any threats to STARS?
I think all of healthcare is under some strain right now. I will say that we've had excellent partnership with both the government of Manitoba and Shared Health. Right now, we are funded about 80% through government funding, and we fundraise through our foundation, our charitable foundation, the remaining 20% of our funding. And Manitobans have been generous. I do think that the concept that STARS is an actual not-for-profit charity. Maybe not all Manitobans know that, but in fact we are. And in fact, that funding model allows us to be very nimble and try to stay on the cutting edge of medical care and technology.
You're at the Association of Manitoba Municipalities Spring Convention. What is your message for the leaders of these municipalities? What are you telling them about?
We're really going through what a STARS mission is about. So STARS is all about the patient, really. So it was driven by need in the community and is supported by the community. And so ultimately at the core of pretty much every decision we make is what's best for the patient. We call those our very important patients, our VIPs. What's best for that VIP in that moment? And that context, I think, is important for everybody to know. And to understand that, I think you have to understand the patient journey. And so today we'll be taking the members through the anatomy of a mission really from start to end.
A mission perhaps like the one of June 15th last year, where there was a terrible bus crash near Carberry, Manitoba on the Trans-Canada Highway. Can you tell us about what happened on that day?
Yeah, so incredibly tragic event here in Manitoba. So the Carberry bus crash, excuse me, is an example of how really having a coordinated response, I think, is so important, especially in rural areas. So for the Carberry response, I can't say enough about the local response, the local fire departments, the paramedics and EMS crews, and the local hospitals and healthcare providers who really mustered for that. So we play a role in that response. We're woven into the safety net. We work very closely with Shared Health's MTCC, which is their Medical Transportation Communication Center here in Brandon, as well as with it's called a Vectors program, and it's a coordination program that Shared Health has launched. And so we worked very closely with those organizations to, kind of mount what we could to help at that scene. And so we did bring helicopter resources from Saskatchewan, as well as our Winnipeg helicopter responded. And I think in total we had about 20 staff involved in our response. We had about 13 care providers here at Brandon at one point. So,
any lessons learned from that crash and from looking back on it?
I have to say that STARS has had a lot of, I would call it, institutional experience with what we call mass casualty incidents. So unfortunately, these seem to occur at a regular interval, but whether it's the Columbia Icefields tragedy, the Humboldt bus crash, James Smith cremation tragedy or the Carberry tragedy. Like, unfortunately, we're gaining a lot of experience in these events. So we're always looking at our response and really taking it back to that patient. How can we do better the next time? So we do have this very robust QA, quality assurance program that we follow.
Is communication ever an issue due to poor cell service?
There can be challenges with cell service. Like, we live in provinces that have massive geographies and relatively small populations. And so there are areas where there isn't good cell service. We do have, so we can get involved in a call through other means, though. So some people have satellite phones. Many people have, kind of SOS beacons for wilderness travelers. And now with the advent of satellite internet access, I think that we're going to see more and more calls from very remote regions.
Final message for Manitobans?
We're from your community. We're your neighbors. We look forward to being here and taking care of critically ill Manitobans for a long time to come. So thank you for having me.
Dr. John Froh is the Chief Medical Officer of STARS, a nonprofit organization that provides critical care and medical transport services across Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. Winter may be in the rear view, but Manitoba duo Fire and Smoke, say that again, Manitoba duo Fire and Smoke want to highlight the importance of the coldest season of the year. Apparently one person in the duo was actually originally from Montreal. This is Fire and Smoke with Lady Frost.
Play the most familiar song. I've got nowhere to go, nowhere to go, nowhere to go. Do you see the candles now floating in the air? Gently birds and forest sprites now come to braid my hair. See through the dark jacks come for me, and I shall be his bride. Round the wheel spins winter time, I'm never at his side. At his side, at his side. Ooh. Across the panes, cast stars around the rooms. Eyes like two blue agates fixed beneath an icy stream. It's in the coldest season that the oldest wisdom gleams. And for the sake of all that lives, I pray we never meet. I chase you, chase me around the world. Have our bit of fun, it's as we were when we were girls. Darling, but a moment you were gone and I was lost. Fear not for me, for glad of heart I am as Lady Frost. I've put to bed what you've brought up. You've baked the bread, I've come to sup. You are the wine, I am the cup. Can you feel the wind? Can you feel the
What a beautiful song. That's called Lady Frost. It's new music from Fire and Smoke. You'll find it on their new EP, Constance, which is out now. Well, coming up on Radio Noon, we're going to have a conversation about prayer in the legislature. What would you like that opening prayer in the legislature to sound like? Who do you think it should represent? Should there be a prayer at all? We want to hear from you. Our call-in starts, at 12:30. That's a minute from now, and our phone lines are ready. Here are the numbers again. If you're in Winnipeg or if you're somewhere in the province where you get it's free to call Winnipeg on your phone plan, the number is 204-780-0893. We don't want you paying charge for the call, so if you want toll-free, it's 1-800-268-5483. Again, 204-780-0893 in Winnipeg or wherever. It's free to call Winnipeg. And if you need a toll-free number, 1-800-268-5483. Hey, friends watching on YouTube, remember you can send comments too, so please do weigh in. This is a big conversation. The Premier wants to hear from Manitobans, and so do we. So we're going to hear from them and also from our guest, Dr. Raymond Abdurrahman, in just a couple of moments.
This is CBC News. At 12:30, we're at 10 degrees with mostly sunny skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. At the top of the news, Mr. Canoe goes to Washington. Premier Wab Canoe says next week he is leading a delegation to Washington, D.C. to speak with members of Congress, the upper and lower houses. Manitoba business and agricultural leaders and politicians will be with him on the trip. He says with the looming U.S. election in November, it's important to meet with both Democrats and Republicans.
The advice kept coming back that building strong relationships now to ensure that whatever Americans choose as their path forward in the future is going to be the best way that we can have good trade, good economic relationships, and that ongoing valuable partnership with our most important ally.
Canoe says there may be changes on the horizon for trade agreements between the United States and Canada. He wants to have a positive relationship with whomever is in power to ensure Manitoba's interests are protected. The Canadian federal government is rolling out a new national housing strategy. Housing Minister Sean Fraser says Canada's housing plan will build more homes, make renting or buying easier, and do more to support those who can't afford a place to live. Among other things, it will open the door for the federal government to lease and build on underused public lands. It also promises a new mapping tool to track the inventory of available public property. This is the Trudeau government's second national housing strategy. The first was a 10-year initiative launched in 2017. And Winnipeg police arrested a 38-year-old woman after hundreds of financial and identity documents were found in a Fort Richmond home. Police say between October and January, thieves broke into an apartment complex along Dalhousie more than a dozen times. Once inside, they took the mail from a box for more than 300 units. In April, police found the documents, stolen laptops, and a gun. Constable Danny McKinnon says if you're worried, you should contact your financial institution.
You want to see if there's any abnormalities, and of course, cancel your credit card, cancel your debit card. Although it can be cumbersome and a bit of a pain in the butt, it's better to just take that chance.
McKinnon says one person was arrested in February. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, you can head on over to our website. That's cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can use the CBC News app.
Thank you very much, Matt Humphrey.
So good to hear you on the radio, by the way.
It's lovely to hear you, too. You know, you're in another room.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, you could come in this room.
Dare I?
You dare.
Dare I?
Look, maybe Monday at 12:30
Maybe I'll mosey on over
you'll
there.
feel a little brave.
I'll see what's going on.
Take care, Matt.
Back soon.
I just turned my mic off. Riley Laychuk, hello. How are you?
Loving the sunshine.
That's good.
Outside today.
The blinds are down, so I can't really tell how sunny it is.
But it is nice and sunny outside, Janet.
That's a good thing for a Friday.
It is. Looking at temperatures, we're already seeing some double digits in some parts of southern Manitoba. As we head through the noon hour, 11 degrees in Melita, Morden Winkler at 10 this hour, 7s for Brandon, Dauphin, Steinbach, and currently in Winnipeg, it's 8 degrees. Thompson's at -1, Churchill right now at -7. Yes, a little bit of cloud starting to build and a little bit of thin high-level cloud starting to build in to the Westman region and parts of central Manitoba. But yes, otherwise we're looking at a mainly sunny afternoon for much of the province. A few clouds here and there. But it's as we get into Saturday that we see things changing a little bit through the early morning hours. So through the rest of the day today, yes, we're looking at mainly sunny skies. But as we get into the overnight period tonight, clouds will build in and we see some precipitation, a little bit of instability early in the morning west to east across Manitoba as we see a trough line with a little bit of instability pushing through the province. So by 7 o'clock in the morning, a little bit of flurry activity possible, scattered in nature for areas like Flin Flon, Lynn Lake, up to Dooley Lake, and even Thompson could see a few flurries first thing in the morning. For the south, this is a chance of showers through the early morning hours across southern Manitoba. That does depart. By the time we get to about supper hour tomorrow, we're back into the sunshine for southern Manitoba, and we're looking at a mostly cloudy day as we head through Sunday as well. This ahead of our next weather maker. We see cloud building in Monday, and this will be mainly a rain event through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week. In terms of precipitation for the weekend, really trace, if that, across southern Manitoba in some of the shower activity through Saturday. A little bit more organized in the north, but still a little bit on the low side in terms of accumulation. 1 to 2 centimeters at most, I'm thinking, through parts of northern Manitoba as we get through the day on Saturday. Today's forecast, we are looking at 15 degrees in Melita, 13 in Brandon and Winnipeg this afternoon. Emerson looking at a high of 13 as well under a mainly sunny sky, and Thompson mainly cloudy and 6. Looking at the weekend, 19 degrees on the way for tomorrow, some scattered showers in the morning, 17 for Sunday, and then we start to see the clouds building in, and we see a bit of a drop in temperatures back down to single digits by next Wednesday, and a good soaking rain at this point for Tuesday, Wednesday, Janet.
We can't complain about that. We need a good soaking rain.
We need a good soaking rain, and you know what they say, the April showers bring in May flowers. So.
Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to see?
Would be.
Thanks very much, Riley.
Have a great weekend.
You too. All right, my friends, let's have a conversation. Premier Wabkanu wants to change the opening prayer at the legislature.
As we're called by the Speaker of the House to reflect on the people, on a higher power, on the province, on the welfare and prosperity, with the greatest of humility, I would ask for your help in designing words that every Manitoban would feel included by.
Would every Manitoban feel included by? How do you design that? Those comments came from Premier Canoe at a breakfast yesterday with the Manitoba Multi-Faith Council. He's inviting faith leaders and all Manitobans to redesign the prayer, which was adopted in 1937. It has been tweaked since then, but it still refers to God and sounds Christian. How do you feel about changing the prayer? How would you make it more inclusive? Weigh in on this topic. Give us a call, 204-780-0893. We're standing by right now to hear from us. We have a special guest with us today. Our guest is Dr. Raymond Abdurrahman, who joins us now by Zoom. He is a clinical psychologist and an advocate for inclusion, principal of Lead with Diversity, a diversity consulting firm. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Abdurrahman. Let's listen to what is actually said in the current prayer. Here's Speaker Tom Lindsay reciting it.
O eternal and almighty God, from whom all power and wisdom come, we are assembled here before thee to frame such laws as may tend to the welfare and prosperity of our province. Grant, O merciful God, we pray thee, that we may desire only that which is in accordance with thy will, that we may seek it with wisdom and know it with certainty, and accomplish it perfectly for the glory and honor of thy name, and for the welfare of all our people. Amen.
Dr. Abdu Rahman, again, thank you for joining us today, especially by Zoom, because that allows our folks who are watching us on YouTube, CBC Manitoba's YouTube page. Remember, you can find the show there later if you want to listen back to it, to join in as well. Your reaction to that prayer you just heard as a way to begin the legislative session?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I think it reflects a duality that we have in Canada, where on the one side we have a province, Quebec, where we have Bill 21 that prevents people from wearing religious symbols or garbs. But on the other hand, we lead our legislative with actually a religious prayer. So I find that I think it's not uncommon, but it reflects the duality of the experiences of Canadians and Manitobans.
How would you go about making that prayer more inclusive?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about prayer is that there's commonalities across different faiths, right? So I think, when we think about the monotheistic faiths, generally most of those would be the same. So that's one thing. I actually think what we need to do is move forward. I think this is one step forward. I think what we need to do is start to move forward and make our culture more inclusive, and not just that one single prayer inclusive. Because the dilemma here is when we do something like that, it's a symbolic thing, but it doesn't really shift culture. I think what Premier Wab is trying to do is shift culture to be more decolonial and more inclusive, which is good. But in trying to do so, we can't be tokenistic. And so what we really need to be discussing, I think, is a broader change in culture. And many people have heard me talk about our Celebrate Everything initiative that Folklorama, for example, has recently adopted, and many other organizations and businesses in our city have. And I think we as a province need to move towards something like that. So we can do the prayer, most certainly. What I think we need to do is go much further.
Cindy has joined us now. Cindy is joining us on the line. What do you think we should do to make this prayer more inclusive?
So what I was thinking, if people don't believe in God, is you could just take the word God out of it. So I think, first of all, we have to decide if we want it to be a prayer versus something like an intention. So an intention is that you take everything that, like I heard the prayer this morning, and I think the intentions are all good. So, you make these laws with respect for all people that you represent. You make these laws for the good of the common good. And so it doesn't necessarily have to bring religion into it. However, because the prayer didn't say specifically which religion it was referring to, it didn't say Jesus or anything like that. So it was very open, but I think that if people are reflecting and thinking that this God was part of colonialism, then they're not going to think that the people saying it have everyone in mind. So I think you could just bring it back to intention and common values that we all share.
What intention and common values? Dr. Abdul Rahman, what do you think of that?
Yeah, what your listener there actually made some very good and important points. I'd like to think about a couple of things when it comes to that. Number one, we live in a allegedly multicultural society, and I say allegedly because I don't think we are. But we do want to move towards a more pluralistic and democratic society. And that means we need to accept the points of views of all Canadians and all Manitobans. And that means for those who have a faith and believe in God, and those who are agnostic, and those who are atheist. And I think it's critically important that we include all those voices. So yes, I agree. Intention is a good way to do it. But this is where, when we approach issues like just approaching the prayer, it marginalizes and singles out people who are agnostic or who are atheist. And I think there's a dilemma in that. Further to that, I think we also need to be thoughtful when we are thinking about faith and religion is that when there's a lot of people who have a hang up and concerns about religion, and we think about organized religion, and I talk about this in my new book, we have to remember that our concern with faith and religion usually comes from a Western or a Eurocentric perspective, challenges with the Western church. And therefore, a lot of people who want some form of spirituality tend to turn to some form of Eastern philosophy or faith. So we want to open the door, basically, and start to see faith as an option, but it cannot be the single defining factor. And I'm going to go back. I think this is where when we approach culture, where it allows everybody to be a part of it, to have a say, but not imposing other people to adopt that belief is the way to go about it.
Cindy, thank you so much for your call today. We really appreciate hearing from you. This morning on Information Radio, we heard from John Neufeld, who is lead pastor at Eastview Community Church.
I think if we take prayer seriously, the person praying is engaging someone, in this case, a spiritual being of some sort, and they're of personal earnest conviction. To make it generic actually is a disservice to most faiths because we are particular people. We have particular faith. We have deep passions and strong convictions. I would actually suggest that the prayer be more particular, but there be more people who pray different prayers, where there's actually a prayer on Monday that is spoken by person of Catholic faith, person on Tuesday of the Sikh faith, of Thursday of the Muslim faith, on Friday an evangelical, that they are able to express from their deep conviction words that are authentic.
That was John Neufeld, lead pastor at Eastview Community Church. We've got Jordan on the line. Jordan, thank you for your patience. Jordan, thanks for joining us here on Radio Noon. What would you like to contribute to the conversation?
Well, I think I just wanted to say, and I think it was kind of now I'm echoing the person who called before, but a big part of it is about just reminding people to be humble. And I think that's, that doesn't have to be a specific faith. I think it's just, there's nothing wrong with taking a moment to consider that, despite being leaders in our culture and our society, they're not the only power, and that they're not all of the power, that they need to respect the responsibility that they have.
Are you talking about the government, the MLAs?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Keep going, please. Sorry.
Yeah, and so I think that that's the purpose. Or it's reasonable to see that as the purpose, and I don't think it's reasonable for people to be offended if that's the intent. So, in terms of being inclusive, I kind of wanted to, because I heard the word atheist and agnostic used by your guest, and I kind of wanted to point out that being atheist is every bit as much is every bit as offensive as a faith from exclusive, I should say, not offensive. It's not an inclusive perspective. Being atheist is specifically disbelieving in something, as opposed to being agnostic, which is to be indifferent. So I would lump the atheist in with every other faith when it comes to inclusivity. But in terms of the purpose of a prayer, it's just to acknowledge and show respect for more.
Is there a question that you would like to ask of the doctor or of other callers?
I don't think I have a specific question. I just think, I guess the question would be, are we really hurting or harming anybody by asking that we, taking a moment to reflect, and maybe the language can change, but taking a moment to reflect on the greaterness, the greater picture than just those individuals that are leading us in our government.
Thank you very much, Jordan. I really appreciate that thought there. It is a question, too, of church and state. A lot of people wonder why does it have to be a prayer at all? We got a call earlier today from a woman on our listener line named Sarah. Let's take a listen as I'm talking more slowly so that our wonderful Dylan Longhurst can find Sarah's call. And there he goes. And let's take a listen to what Sarah has to say.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I want to preface this by saying that I'm aware of how complex and how nuanced this conversation is. So what I'm about to say is not said in a flippant or dismissive way at all. But why are we even having prayer in the legislature anymore? I am a religious person. I am a very spiritual and faith-based person. And I understand that, as you know, faith is very important to people, and the government is supposed to be representative of everyone. And we have such a beautifully diverse landscape of people, religiously, spiritually, culturally, ethnically, racially, and I don't really understand the purpose. I mean, why not instead have some sort of acknowledgement statement or a welcoming statement? But I'm not sure why prayer has to be central to what is happening in our government.
That was Sarah, who called our listener line earlier today. If you'd like to weigh in on this and why you think it should be a prayer or shouldn't be a prayer, do we need this at all? How do we do this inclusively? 204-780-0893. Dr. Abdul Rahman, what do you think about the need for a prayer? Does it have to be a spiritual moment that we take in order to set the tone for the day at the legislature?
I mean, we do bring up the issue of church versus state, and maybe if I can answer this a different way. I mean, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about these small issues, and earlier this year or last year, where Winnipeg Transit decided to take down the holiday greetings or different greetings on the bus, and people were very concerned. The dilemma with inclusive acts is when we have such a thirst and there's such a vacuum and a void of inclusivity in our culture, we end up making a big deal and sometimes arguing over the small things, and so my point of view is simply that we need to make sure that if we move towards a prayer, we need to be thinking about being inclusive towards every person. I like the idea of different prayers, but it behooves the point is that we're arguing about this when really what we need to be doing is moving our culture to be far more inclusive. Because when a culture is inclusive versus a prayer or how we lead our government, we become inclusive without expecting everybody to go along. This way we can learn to appreciate and acknowledge people, and even all of us acknowledge a day off without needing to adopt values, beliefs, or practices. And so what I'm seeing happening here is really another reflection of how thirsty we are for inclusion in our own province here, and how we missed the boat so often that we go to these small tokenistic acts. And to me, that really doesn't solve our problems.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's a step, though, on the road to inclusion. Daphne wants to weigh in on this. Daphne's an Ojibwe atheist. What would you like to contribute, Daphne? Thanks for calling, by the way. I should just welcome you. Welcome to Radio Noon, Daphne. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Daphne.
Language. Okay, so I'm really proud of WAB Community for addressing so many things and making so many changes. But I've got to tell you, I was shocked when I found out that there was prayer at all. I didn't realize that we prayed before things in our government. I thought that was an American thing. But now that I realize that, I actually think it should still be removed. I don't agree with the preacher earlier who said, let's do Catholic, Sikh, blah, blah, blah. Unless at Friday you can have the atheists like me come up and say, hey, that was all crock. You know what I mean? Get rid of the religion in the government, period. So many things go wrong when they're entwined. Have not we learned that yet?
Daphne, thank you so much for your perspective. Thanks for calling Radio Noon today. It's a tangly thing, that church and faith question, but it's not a small thing to a lot of people. And one of the things that the Premier said is he's really concerned that no one feel like something's being taken away. But the truth is, people are going to feel if there's a change, if the word God comes out of the prayer. There are Christians who may feel that they've lost something. We have Brenda on line 3. Brenda, should a prayer be said at the beginning of the legislative session?
No, I don't think so. I think, if anything, there should be a pledge by our legislatures to honor our planet and the people on it without religion being part of the issue. My feeling is, although I have total respect for people who are devout, and I have seen many people that makes them great people, but I also recognize that through history, religion has been the cause, or at least the rationalization for more wars than we can count, and our current situation in the world, I think just validates that. I'm very disturbed by the trend of right-wing religious people taking over government and blurring the lines between church and state, not just, all over the world that's happening. So I think that we should have a pledge by our legislatures to honor the planet, to honor the people on it, and to put humanity first. We have to get government to make that line between church and state definitive.
Brenda, thank you so much for calling into Radio Noon today. Dr. Abdul Rahman, what do you think of a pledge as an idea? Now, I know you want to make full societal things. You think this is a small step toward it, but a pledge, would that achieve the idea that the Premier likes, which is just setting the tone, getting us all to think about the greater good at the start of the session?
I love these conversations because we learn so much from each other, and I really appreciate the concept of a pledge. To me, it's less of, I think it's important when we have a pluralistic society that we don't have one particular faith leading the charge on how we set laws and govern. I think it's critically important, and something like a pledge would do a really good job of that, right? So when, the pledge to the diversity of the people, including faith-based people, in Manitoba. So I like that idea. I think it's a great one.
We've got Frank standing by. Frank, join us in this conversation. We're talking about whether or not maybe the prayer should be replaced with a pledge. What do you think of that idea?
Good afternoon. I think that's a great idea. It sort of took the words out of my mouth. I hadn't called it a pledge. But, the problem with trying to create a new prayer that is inclusive is going to be virtually impossible. As other people have pointed out, trying to include an atheist in a prayer simply is never going to work, and somebody will always feel slighted. So this idea that perhaps, some sort of a reminder of ethics and service to the people, that we've elected them not to act for themselves, but for the people that they have sworn to serve, as the previous caller said. We don't bring invocations to supernatural forces into really any other of the, mundane, secular, day-to-day aspects of our lives necessarily. I don't want other professionals to invoke supernatural forces. I want them, to do their job according to their training and their abilities to the best extent possible. So, I think a non-religious secular pledge is a very good idea.
Frank, thank you so much for calling in. What, Dr. Abdul Rahman, would you want that pledge to say?
I think the pledge really has to speak to not just a commitment or intent to the diversity, but an actual call to action. I mean, part of the dilemma here is that, we can talk as much as we like about learning how to ride a bike. We will never learn how to ride a bike unless we actually get our butt on that bike. And so pledges, I think, are fantastic, but I think the pledge has to be a call to action. Psychologically speaking, things like empowering statements or pledges, they're very effective when they have a specific call to action. And if we had that kind of a reminder, in our legislative, perhaps it might be a call to some engagement with true multiculturalism here in our province.
I thank you, sir, for engaging with us on this conversation. So many other great conversations, too. You mentioned you have a new book out. Plug it. Go ahead. Plug it.
Sure. Yeah. It's called... now I can't remember the name of my book. That's a sign. It's called Developing Anti-Racist Cultural Competence. And I wrote it because I think in our diverse world, we really need to learn how to engage with people, diverse people in our own community, rather than looking at this as an international issue. And so it's a skills book.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah. I'm so glad. And I wanted to give you that because I want to pick it up. I know I'm going to learn from you. Dr. Raymond Abdul Rahman joins us by Zoom. He's a clinical psychologist and principal of Lead with Diversity, a diversity consulting firm. We are grateful, sir, for you sharing your expertise with us and hope you'll join us again. Okay, the conversation continues. We're running out of time here, but we'll call our listener line if you still want to weigh in. It's 204-788-3797. So what do you think of these idea of having call-in shows on Radio Noon, taking the last half hour to hear from you? This is my first week in this job. How am I doing? I'm not looking for empty praise here, but just weigh in. This is your show, and we want to hear from you in every way we can. I want to thank all the people who helped me this week, on my first week putting the show together. It does take a village to raise a CBC radio program. Our village includes Matt Humphrey in news, Riley Lachuk in everything. Riley does everything around here. He's covering weather right now. Travis Peterson has been helping us bring the pictures to you on YouTube. Dylan Longhurst makes everything happen technically. He's playing the beautiful music right now. Wendy Parker has been my brain this week. She organizes everything and keeps me on track. Our leads in the unit are Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. I want to thank Melanie Verhaeg and Bertram Schneider as well for giving me the job. Thanks very much. It's been fun. You are listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a fabulous weekend. Remember to tune in at 3 for Faith Fundal and Up to Speed. Coming up next here on CBC Podcast Showcase. Have a great weekend.